All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to talk to you. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and especially excited on this Tuesday to be talking to my friend Ed Fischman. Ed, your first, I think, appearance on Halitics must be
Yes,
pretty exciting for you.
incredibly exciting.
I'm sure you may hear from 3 or 4 people you know, assuming everyone who watches this live stream knows you. It's
Okay,
possible.
if they have my number.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm just going to try to get your audio down a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, and for that, I apologize to the listeners. I don't think it should be a problem going forward. Ed, we talked about several things just before we went live, and I do apologize for the abrupt transition to live. But first of all, let's talk about what MCDCC stands for as I identify you. Ed Fischman, MCDCC. I could tell people, but why don't you do that?
So in primary 2 years ago, I was elected to represent District 18 to the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, which is a thing that most people don't know exists and don't know what it does. It sounds very communist China kind of thing, but we are the face of the party in the county. And so hopefully we're organizing. We help run the precinct organization. And the one thing we do that's a real consequence is we put a lot of people into the state legislature when there are vacancies, frequent vacancies lately. We're about to have one and probably two more, and we're going to be pretty much have fully replaced 1/4 of the county delegation since our election a year and a half ago. So without elections, we're putting people in there, and that's an issue we've been trying to address at the state level with the legislature, but we haven't had any action on bills yet.
Well, and there's a lot of controversy, right, over the power that Maryland county central committees have over who gets into the state legislature. And I know there's been a lot of controversy. Do you want to weigh in on and explain that briefly?
Sure. As I said, like in Montgomery County, we had a huge turnover already. Governor Moore came in after 8 Democrats were out in the wilderness for 8 years, and Governor Moore filled a lot of seats in his administration with people who were in the legislature. And and Montgomery County being what it is, we had the lion's share of those. Our procedure is people can apply, and each of the committee members gets a vote, and there's some question whether that should happen if one of them are in the mix in their district, but each member gets to vote, and so we have roughly 25 members. I think right now one of our members just resigned. And you can apply to be a member of the Central Committee as well.
Well, you're elected. You were elected, and I know that in between elections, the MCDCC actually selects replacements. So, for example, if you had to step down for whatever reason, and one reason is often that MCDCC members are appointed by the MCDCC, Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. It works the same in all the county committees. And I don't mean to step on you, Ed, but I just want to move forward quickly. You actually get to choose.
One last point about that is that
before
our committee was elected in 2022, there was a string of 8 or 10 straight appointments that were filled from our Central Committee. And since then, we've already filled 5 appointments. And we'll fill the 6th next month without going to members of the Central Committee. So I think we've made tremendous progress just by making a stand against that. But we want to see some action at the state level so that this doesn't.
I think the concern is that ostensibly a Democratic body, the state legislature, both the House of Delegates and the Senate, the state Senate, can have their people in it. The representatives of the people are not elected at first blush. They're actually chosen by these bodies, the county central committees, to serve out a term. And I think that's what frustrates a lot of people, especially, and you just indicated, you're not choosing your own necessarily to complete terms, but that seems to be a problem.
And as I said, that's a real change from where we were. The without getting too deep in this, when we started our revolution in Montgomery County in 2018, we had a project to get people on the Central Committee so that we could move them forward towards the legislature. And that's worked in a few cases, but we didn't build the power that way that we hoped. And so that's still a work in progress.
Well, the reason I wanted to have you on, Ed, was to address the upcoming Maryland primaries, which is May 14th. I know we diverted, excuse me, into the arcana of Maryland elections, but I think those are really important, but maybe this is not the best time. So I present this race coming up May 14th, and the main candidates is all centrists. In fact, I titled this Centrist Dream, excuse me, got a little cough there. Also, corporate Dems versus no labels Republican. Should we care who wins? So first of all, is it fair to call this race, the overarching race, a centrist dream? Is it fair to call the Democratic top challengers, Hogan, Trone, and also Brooks, corporate Dems? You can answer those two questions now.
So, I mean, Hogan is clearly, by definition, a no labels Republican. He wants to, there's a poll out and discussion in the Baltimore Sun today where, you know, a lot of voters see him as independent. He's certainly not independent in any way, but he did work with and help lead no labels. So I'll buy that. Corporate Dems, I mean, David Trone is literally corporate, and he has a very large corporation, and he's a multimillionaire for running that. Centrist, I think, definitely describes both candidates. Neither of them are really embracing the left. And I think that's a phenomenon pretty much statewide in our congressional races too, although there are a few progressives running.
So is there any way that can change? Is it just that the money, the influence of lobbyists and donors, high dollar donors, is just simply too great, Ed, at this point?
So I'll push back against that. David Trone is where he's at, not because he's relying on high dollar donors, but because he's wealthy. He's spending $40 million already in this primary of his own, is what I read today, which is mind blowing. But it's given him a really strong campaign, and it's why he's leading Angela Alter-Brooks in the polls right now. And it may be the thing that makes him competitive against Larry Hogan going forward. Angela has not raised that much money, so money gets you some notice, and raising it can be problematic. And I love to see public financing here. I don't think it's the be all to end all. I hear your point.
I'm asking. I really wanted your response. It seems like someone like Trone can win if they don't raise a lot of corporate money because they have so much of their own. I guess if a candidate doesn't have a base, a money base, either in their own bank account or from wealthy interests like the casino industry, as an example, the restaurant industry as another example, then can they win?
No, that's fair. And Jamie Raskin sat this one out for various reasons, but he was able to take on Trone in 2016 because he was able to raise what was then an impressive haul of about $4 or $5 million, I think, for his campaign. So it matters. It does matter. Yeah.
Ed Fischman from Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee with us. He, as in the name, MCDCC, is a Democrat, but he's giving us his honest opinion here. Does it matter? Now, there's, by the way, is the quote that you referenced earlier from the Baltimore Sun. 63% of the Maryland voters view Hogan as independent-minded, while just 23% consider him a partisan Republican. So here's my, let me really point the question, and then you can make it more general, Ed. Does this mean that he's independent-minded to the point where if Trump is the next president, and I'm not saying he will be, I actually don't think he will be, but assuming that somehow a Republican wins, does this mean that Hogan would vote against some of their judicial nominees because they will not, bring back the right to choose, for example, the reproductive rights? Is he that independent-minded?
I mean, I would say that Larry Hogan isn't the least bit independent-minded. He's definitely not part of the Trumpist takeover of the Republican Party. He's an old line Republican.
Well, he voted for Ronald Reagan in 2020.
Right. And then that's pretty darn conservative. I mean, Larry Hogan is not, I would not call him independent-minded. I think he's resisting the takeover by Trump and really the MAGA extremists in the party. And I suppose that's to be admired a little bit, folks like him and Lynn Cheney, but they're not independent-minded in any normal sense of the word and what we would have thought about it before 2016.
Well, if a voter is concerned about the makeup of the federal judiciary, which has certainly swung very far to the right, you're saying, and just I'm asking, I'm not putting these words in your mouth, but what I hear you saying is Larry Hogan is not going to be championing an independent, quote, centrist, unquote, judiciary. He is going to be there to rubber stamp the Republican nominees to the court. Or let me put it the other way. What if Biden is reelected without a Senate majority of Democrats, which is certainly possible, especially if Hogan wins? Would Hogan join McConnell and filibuster every Democrat nominated to the Supreme Court?
Right. So there'll be another Republican leader, but not McConnell. But I would think certainly, if there's a Republican president, Larry Hogan is going to be voting with the Republican caucus. Will he be able to support some Biden nominees? It's
an important question, is it not?
It's a huge question. Because I think you're right, but Biden is still the most likely to win. There will be, in Hogan's case, I'm guessing it'll be a candidate choice by choice, depending on the person. I think he's more likely than not to vote with the Republican caucus. There may be exceptions.
All right, folks, I am noticing I'm getting some feedback from Ed, which I don't quite understand why. It's not on him. It's on me. It's on my system here. So if you're having trouble with the audio, I will upload a better quality video after this, where I can take out the feedback. So you can come back and watch it, after post-processing. So Ed, let me stick, though. These questions, I think, really are important because I think folks are deciding, like me, is it worth my time? Is it worth my time voting in the primary? Is it worth my time voting in the general? You have indicated.
I'll put on my Democratic hat here and say yes. If you want to see Democratic control in the Senate, and I think most Marylanders do, certainly almost every Democrat would, then it's that seat may be the deciding one, and I would urge people to take that in consideration when they go into the voting booth.
Well, I mean, I would like to see control in the Senate to the point where Democrats vote against funding Israel. I would like to see Democratic control in the Senate if Democrats were prepared to stand for real health care reform, which ultimately, to me, has to be Medicare for all, but even something that gets us a lot further down the road towards cost controls on for-profit health care and greater coverage, significantly higher tax on the wealthy. So I guess my question is, how much could I hope for if I help prevent a Republican takeover of the Senate?
So that's a very fair question. Nothing dramatic will change unless we get rid of the filibuster. And that was clear when the Democrats had the trifecta 2 years ago. So Manchin and Sinema were at least upfront about being obstacles there. We don't know if other Democrats behind the scenes were, but they won't be there. So I think there's at least a decent chance that we might see some real change. But there, certainly, you know, with the corruption on the Supreme Court, there are a lot of Democrats and now Roe who will be demanding real action that Democrats have not taken, but you know, the elected Democrats have not taken before. So there's going to be a lot of pressure to remove the filibuster. And once we have that out of the way, there's a lot of progress we can make.
I mean, I hope you're right. The problem is, even without the filibuster, or even in situations where Democrats don't have the filibuster to blame for inaction, they've still failed to act, or have acted in ways that I really, really, really don't like. But we don't really need to get into that. I do hear what you're saying. I just feel like it's often used as an excuse by Democrats for failing to take on the forces of wealth and privilege in this country.
Fair. But I think it's also fair to point out that there was a very short window where Democrats didn't have the filibuster in place. You know, that was in the very beginning of the Obama administration. So ever since then, it's really been a question, would Democrats get rid of that filibuster? And those votes
All right,
haven't.
Ed, so let's get back to this specific, well, we were talking about this race and the importance of electing a Democrat, keeping the narrow majority in the Senate, and this race could obviously be the decider. Right now, according to the Sun, Trone with a very significant lead. You have indicated, well, first of all, does it, in terms of the two candidates that are at the top, can we say one is more progressive than the other? And I'll throw out there, it seems as though both are getting some support from labor unions. Trone got the vote of the Apple ballot, which is very influential here in Maryland. We like to believe we have this outstanding education system. It may not be quite all it's cooked up to be, but that's what we want to believe, and we care about education. The teachers support Trone. That matters. Is he really better on education, A? And why is also Brooks so far behind if she has the endorsement of, you know, big shot Dems like the aforementioned Raskin and the popular Democratic governor, Wes Moore?
There's not a lot of local coverage, I think. Wes Moore got through similarly. I mean, if Angela Alsbrooks was not facing somebody like David Trone, I think she would have a very commanding lead in the polls, but she can't buck the publicity that he's able to generate for himself. Wes Moore was able to do that himself 2 years ago because he outraised the other candidates, and in you know, a low publicity campaign, low information campaign, that can carry the day. David Trone is just overwhelming her right now.
Well, he's a Congress member, right? I mean, that he has an advantage there. It's not statewide office, but he is a U.S. Congress member. He has been reelected. I think that gives him a leg up.
A lot of people thought Angela would have a pretty strong base in Prince George's County, although she's had some conflicts there with the council members and some of the progressive groups. And then they thought she would be very strong in Baltimore as well. And I think that polling does show that she must have some real base up there, although the reporting on it doesn't get into it. But there's no gender split between the candidates, but there seems to be a huge racial divide. That Angela, I believe the paper said, was leading by close to 40 points among African Americans. So
do you know, can that purely be attributed to some kind of tribalism in the ballot box? In other words, blacks vote for the black candidate, whites vote for the white candidate, absent some other reason to choose. And I guess I would look at the two of them and say there isn't really a good reason. You know, they're not that different, right? They're not that much to separate them in terms of policy.
So they come from different backgrounds, and yeah, I think tribalism probably plays a large part in how people perceive them, and that's natural. As I say, Trone is able to sort of cut through some of that with his money.
Well, that wouldn't explain, though, to be fair, Ed, to David Trone, that would not explain the support that Trone has gotten, at least from the teachers union.
So the teachers union spoke really positive, glowingly even about their engagement with David Trone since he got into office. They did not endorse him when he ran in the primary. And he was on the phone to the teachers union the next day after he lost. After he won, having lost their endorsement. So they've been able to work with him very strongly, and they really appreciated his support over the years. What's it, 6 years he's been in office. And he's been strong on, at our revolution, we were pushing on the one fair wage issue, and Trone was a strong supporter and actually spoke to the needs.
And let me just clarify, that's the tip. That's to end the tipped wage disparity, and to say, no, if you work in a restaurant as a server, you get the regular minimum wage. So I give Trone credit for that.
And spoke to needing to raise the minimum wage to $20 nationally. So that's pretty strong. But there are other issues where I would say Alsobrooks is to his left, so it's a mixed bag with them.
I know Alsobrooks was a big champion of casino gambling, which is one of the issues that I find most important, and that position I find absolutely reprehensible, completely unacceptable. I view that as a betrayal, frankly, of her black, especially constituents, because study after study has shown that the African American communities are the ones that are harmed disproportionately by casino gambling. But any poor, struggling, working community is harmed by them.
Undoubtedly, that speaks to the influence that MGM has in Prince George's County with national.
I don't think Trone has been great on that issue. He may not have tied himself to it. She did, because she supported the, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the MGM facility there, the casino on the Potomac in Prince George's County.
Right. And I don't know where Trone is on the issue, so
I don't think he's really spoken on it, and wisely so, because whatever he'd say could redound against him. They both have taken similar positions on a ceasefire. Both have said no, Israel needs to stop pause its killing Gazans. So I guess they neither get a lot of, there's not a lot of separation there. At your view, correct me if I'm wrong, is we should care because regardless of which one of them is nominated, it's important to defeat Hogan. And you don't really have a stake, right? You haven't even, have you decided? And tell us if you want which one of them you'll vote for. You can't see, by the way, I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong. Could you say I'm going to be supporting, if it were true, I know it isn't, you've already made clear, but could you say I support Larry Hogan, or would that violate some sort of high sign you've agreed to as a member of the Democratic Central Committee?
I could not do that. In terms of the primary, I can't tell you, as long as you've got that graphic there, I can't tell you who I would support, but I'll tell you honestly that I haven't made up my mind who I'm voting yet.
Well, I don't have a graphic up right now. Oh, that says MCDCC. Oh, okay. Right. Let me change.
Some states, the Democratic Party is happy to pick favorites, but in Maryland, we're not allowed to in the primary.
All right, Ed, I took the logo off there, so now you can tell us.
Seriously, I haven't made up my
mind. I know. To be fair, Ed really has, well, I shouldn't say that because I don't want to get him in any trouble. But my understanding, all sincerity, is he has not made a decision. But I thought you could endorse. I didn't realize that. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot.
On my own, I'm allowed to, but I can't identify myself as a Central Committee member then.
All right, Ed Fischman with us on the Halitics program. Do hope you subscribe. Please do subscribe. We really need to get those numbers up. Well, I do. I guess I don't know if anyone else cares less, but I do. Obviously, I want to get, it's vindication for me, right? The more people who watch and having some influence would be very, very nice. And then I get to 500 subscribers, I think they'd start sending me somewhere around $1 a day or something from Google. So that, I guess, would mean something. By the way, I get credit for Ed's being on the MCDCC. Full disclosure, I was your treasurer. I was your treasurer.
Yes. Couldn't have done it without you, Al.
It didn't require a lot of work. Ed did not raise money.
Yeah, no, and there are a lot of people on the committee who really campaigned for it. And credit to them, I guess. My take on it was I wanted to be out there campaigning for candidates. In 2018, it was Elrich and Jealous. This time around, it was Mark Elrich. And I just hopefully let my presence out there carry the day, but I never campaigned for myself, even for a moment.
Ed, I really appreciate your coming on. I know you have a lot to do. You're a busy guy. I don't want to keep you. I have some other topics, and I would keep you all show, but I know you've got to go. But before I let you go, we talked about this is not just the U.S. Senate race. That may be the most important one. Do you care to weigh in on any of the other congressional races coming up? And the two that seem to jump out at us are in 6, which is Trone's district. That's Western Maryland. Obviously, he is leaving his seat to run for U.S. Senate, whether he wins or loses. Right? What if he loses the primary? Could he stay in Congress?
No, because the Democrats will be I mean, he could run as an independent, but Democrats will be choosing a nominee on the same day. So he could not be our nominee going forward.
I really appreciate. Look at that detail there. He could run as an independent, sort of a Joe Lieberman type campaign, I suppose. But he's not going to do that. So, who are the top choices on the Democratic side in 6?
So I think the party establishment is hoping April Delaney will carry the day in the primary because she can self-fund, and that's money that the Democrats don't have to worry about raising for Maryland, which is something we've never done before. It would be a really novel for us to start having to go to the national fundraisers and bring money into the state. So I think, there's that. There are some.
Well, the name Delaney has a long history there because her husband was the Congress member there until, was it 2020, I believe?
From 2012 to 2018, I believe. I may have those years wrong, but I think that's right. So that does carry some weight, and it's a competitive district. If people are concerned about Democratic control in the Senate, that district may also decide who runs the House. It really could be that close. There are a lot of states where I think the Democrats hope for a little more movement against gerrymandering in Wisconsin and Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and it didn't happen. So it's going to be down to the wire for control of the House too. There are some really good candidates out there. A couple of delegates. Joe Vogel has raised a decent amount of money, and some excitement. Leslie Lopez as well. Mayor from Hagerstown, Takesha Martinez, has right up there with Vogel in fundraising. So they're 1 and 2 in terms of number of donors.
I understand she's running as the progressive.
Yes. Although I'm sure it's a term Vogel will embrace too, but I think the consensus is Martinez is to his left. One of my hats is Progressive Neighbors. So as long as you don't have my NCDC label there, I'll tell you that Progressive Neighbors endorsed Takesha Martinez.
Well, to give Joe Vogel credit, I mentioned that casino gambling is one of my bugbears, and he was the one Democrat on the House Ways and Means Committee who voted against the online casino gambling bill sponsored by the industry. And much to my disappointment, Ed, you don't have to comment if you don't like to, but one of, I think, both of our favorites at one point, and I'll just call her right out, Julie Polakovich-Carr, much to my disappointment, voted in favor of that bill getting out of committee and going to the floor of the House.
I won't comment. I'll just say that people look at voting records and try to find meaning in them. There's a candidate who's touting in the 3rd district, a legislator, former Republican actually, and is touting his environmental bona fides, saying because he voted for the Climate Solutions Now bill 2 years ago. That Democrats kind of gutted that bill a little bit this session, but voting records in the General Assembly among Democrats don't tend to be very different. They all vote the same way.
All right, real quick, I mentioned the congressional races. We talked about Western Maryland 6. Maryland is kind of everyone says how gerrymandered it is. I actually think the districts make some sense. They try to do the pizza slice thing where districts have a little piece of Baltimore City, piece of Baltimore County, and then they go out to more rural areas. And you see that with I think 3, 4, maybe 7 all have parts of Baltimore City, which in a way makes sense because you're getting a more diverse district. 3 does include Baltimore City, also includes a lot of Anne Arundel County. Is Sarah Elfreth, I think she's, what is she, Anne Arundel councilwoman? She may have the lead. I don't know. There's a number of names out there. My friend Juan Dominguez, I call him my friend because I interviewed him. I like him. Probably has no shot. Ed, is there anyone who stands out in your mind in that race?
From a progressive voters perspective, I might lean towards John Morse, who's been endorsed by a bunch of unions, and Bernie Sanders, and I believe AOC as well. He was a union rep, a labor lawyer, I should say, for the flight attendants union, working with Sarah Nelson. So he's really embedded in the labor movement there. I think it's Senator Elfreth, and I think everyone expected that she would be the strongest candidate there. Harry Dunn has raised a fortune there.
Police officer who was involved is sort of trying to stem the tide of the January 6th MAGA folks into the Capitol, trying to keep them out.
Right. He became famous with there's some just striking photographs of him after the riot. And he had strong words about hearing the N-word from people that he was battling. And he's become really, outspoken on the 1-6. Oops.
Ooh.
Sorry.
I got that. I think that was you, Ed. That wasn't me.
Sorry.
All right, I'll let you go, Ed. That's fine. Final words. Really appreciate your coming on board and all the insights. Hate to leave so abruptly, but I hope we can do this again. I'm losing you, Ed.
My brother's calling me. Sorry.
All right, you take care, Ed. Great chatting with you, and we wish you the best. I'll talk to you again soon. I'm going to just go right to just hell at this point. So, Ed, thank you for being on Halitics. Brought a lot to the table. We certainly appreciate that. Yeah, corporate Dems, I understand Ed recoiled a little bit against that. I think it's fair. David Trone is the CEO of a large corporation. When he started, I give him credit for that. That's obviously reflects hard work, perseverance, certainly business smarts. So, yeah, I mean, it does reflect, I think, well on him that he was able to build a very, very successful business. I don't know that that means he should be a U.S. senator. I don't know that means he's the right person for that position. And it certainly, I think, fairly describes him as a corporate Dem. The reason I think I really use the term corporate to also describe also Brooks is because she did get the support of the casino gambling industry, certainly in the past, in any event, if not now, and because she was known as the county executive in Prince George's as a supporter of the developers, of the development community. So, I think that was a very fair characterization as well. Should we care who wins? Ed makes the point, and I think the one about judges is the best. These we've seen the federal judiciary move very, very far to the right. There are only 3 kind of Democrats, Democratic progressive, arguably justices. Apparently, Sonia Sotomayor's health is not great. It's really important, I think, as because of the damage that Republican justices do. If we can possibly prevent more partisan, hard-right justices in the mold of Amy Coney Barrett, Clarence Thomas from getting on the court. So I think those are the arguments for voting for either Trone or also Brooks. I think Ed takes the position, and this is my impression. that Trone would be a stronger opponent to Hogan, but of course Hogan is leading against both. Ultimately, as you know, I've pretty much abandoned the Democratic Party. I can't vote for Joe Biden at this point because of his full-throated support for Israel. Wanted to get to a couple of other topics today. Again, this is Halitics. If you want to call me, I would love to talk to you. The phone number here, you can see it right on your screen, 242 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. I wanted to get this on the screen. I was really interested. This is going back to yesterday's program. I was talking about with Arlen, the Israel-Iran set to, where Israel, in my view, certainly illegally blew up the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, which tantamount to a declaration really of war against both Syria and Iran. Iran responded by sending a bunch of missiles over against Israel, which did very little damage. Apparently one girl, and it's very, very sad, was killed. And I was so disappointed that the weapon didn't, hit an army base or a military target. But for a child to be killed is just awful. So that was very, very disappointing. Of course, Israel brought it on itself. Far more, people say, well, Hamas brought, or the Palestinians, Gaza brought on itself the attack by Israel in the wake of October 7th. I don't buy that at all. Palestinians are oppressed. They're being persecuted. They're being herded into a tiny area. Their land is being stolen from them. They really have no options. Obviously, Israel did not need to bomb the Iranian embassy, and it was against U.S. Preference, and they don't care. They just do it anyway. This is from Shade. This was fascinating to me. I appreciate this information very, very much, Shade. The U.S. and its allies are spending significantly more to defend against Iranian drone and missile attacks on Israel compared to what Iran is spending. That was fascinating to me. So there's real implications. Our complete support, our full-throated support for Israel is costing us dearly. Costing us dearly, both in blood, not so much our blood, but the blood of Gazans, people around the world, and certainly in our treasure. High costs the U.S. is incurring is diverting resources and attention away from supporting Ukraine's defense against Russia. My hope, of course, is we stop both. We should stop supporting Israel. We should also certainly support a peace in Ukraine versus Russia. Trump's plan, which many have called me a Putin puppet or said Trump's plan is for Zelensky to simply surrender. That's just not the case. It's clearly not the case. Trump has made very, very clear what his plan is that everyone puts down their weapons and we talk, but the goal would be some type of cession of land from Ukraine to Russia, Donbass, which is currently occupied mostly, not completely, by Russia, and Crimea, which has been in Russian hands since 2014. And I think that makes sense. I think that's a lot better than what's happening now. I also think if you want concessions from Putin, if you want a more democratic Russia, you're far more likely to get there if there's peace rather than endless war. Okay, Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. We've got about 20 minutes left if I go for the full hour. I wanted to get back to a story that I discussed both Thursday and Friday, and this was the assault at the home of Dean Erwin Chemerinsky of the University of California, Berkeley Law School, one of the most prestigious law schools in the country, one of the most prestigious state law schools in the country, and his wife, Catherine Fiske. They entertain students who are graduating, the third years, 3Ls as they're often called in the parlance, at their home. One of the questions that was raised to me when the justification, whether it was okay, whether it was legally justified for the homeowner, Catherine Fiske, to assault the student, the Palestinian student who was speaking, whether it was okay, was whether, in fact, the event was a Cal Berkeley sanctioned event or whether it was a private event at Professor Fiske's home, the home she shares with Dean Chemerinsky. Well, it was, in fact, a Cal-sponsored event. Cal does pay for the dinner. I don't know if I have that exact quote for you, but I very, very comfortable stating it. And if you force me to, if somebody questions me on it, I'll go dig it up from wherever I found it. So to me, the free speech rights of the Palestinian student, Afaneh is her name, Afaneh, are greater because this was a law school sanctioned event. It wasn't just an event where she was a guest in the home of Dean Chemerinsky and Catherine Fiske. Just to remind you, and by the way, I wanted to discuss it because I was I was critical of both the law professor and her husband, both Thursday and Friday. I think that Dean Chemerinsky's actions over the past several years demonstrate that he is in fact an ally of Palestinian students, and he has gotten a bit of an unfair rap. That doesn't mean it's okay what his wife did. It wasn't. I believe she did assault the student, Afaneh, and if Afaneh prefers charges against her, I would think they might well be sustained. But targeting Chemerinsky, I think, while understandable, while it was okay, I don't like his reaction, I think we must also look at the full record and recognize that Dean Chemerinsky has indeed been an ally of the Palestinian community at Cal Berkeley. So here's the video.
Where millions of Muslims around the world fast, not only from material sustenance, not only from material.
So she plays "It's My House" card, and again, I think that's hard to play when, in fact, the event is being paid for by your employer. And she should not, there's just no question, don't put your hands on this woman, especially in such an aggressive fashion.
We have attorneys. We have attorneys.
Okay, you don't have to get aggressive.
Please leave our house. You are guests at our house.
This is our First Amendment right.
So I'm really disappointed again. The reason this story has really jumped at me is because I have viewed Dean Chemerinsky and progressive lawyers and progressive law school administrators as heroes, as people who are really fighting to make the world a better place. And one way you can do that is by standing up for oppressed, the persecuted victims, like the Palestinians, like Gazans. I didn't see it in that video, and it really, really, really upset me. But I also have not given the due that Dean Chemerinsky is due when it comes to what I just said, standing up for the dispossessed, for victims, for people who are trying to vindicate their rights. So I want to go back and play and why this happened in part, why I got it wrong. Let me just be real clear. Why I got it wrong is because I trusted Brianna Joy Gray from The Hill Rising. And this is not, by the way, an indictment or criticism. I'm not trying to slam Brianna Joy Gray, who I have great respect for and I think does a really good job. I think she's the second best live streamer out there. Obviously, there's one better, but she's really good. And that's why I tend to take her word. But she got this wrong a little bit. So let me play a little bit and explain why she's being unfair to Chemerinsky. So lots of problems. I want to start at 3. I'm not going to go. So you see me doing the slider right here. And let's see if we can get where I think Brianna Joy Gray got it wrong.
Of blood libel and the attacks for me for no apparent reason other than I am Jewish.
So here's the background as to why he's been the focus of student protests. He has a long history of targeting students on campus. This is again from the LA Times, an article that was written at the end of last year. Chemerinsky referenced a bylaw that the Berkeley chapter of Law Students for Justice in Palestine had adopted in the previous academic year, vowing not to invite speakers that have expressed and continue to hold views or host, sponsor, promote events in support of Zionism, the apartheid state of Israel, the occupation of Palestine.
So what she's saying, just to slow down a little bit because she's going so quickly, but when I first watched this, I was very upset. What she's talking about is how the Palestinian law students said they would not invite they would not invite Zionist speakers, that Zionist speakers would not be welcome at Palestinian law student activities events. And okay, they have the right to say that. Brianna Joy Gray is going to tell us that Chemerinsky was opposed to that policy and supported sanctions against the Palestinian students who said they would not invite Zionist speakers. So let me just play a little more from her, and then we'll get to what really happened.
In response to that, after initially taking no action, he said that his students could no longer receive academic credit for working for any journal that had adopted that bylaw. So basically,
okay, so
punishing students for their freedom to express themselves by working for a journal that the journal, now all these degrees of separation, had adopted the bylaws that said that they would not invite any speakers who were Zionist or pro-apartheid.
All right, so that's false, what she just said. Or if that is true, I could find zero evidence that it was true. In fact, just the opposite. Chemerinsky defended the students who said we're not going to have pro-Zionist or pro-Israel speakers. He spoke, this was in direct response to protests at Harvard against Israel. And this was back in January of 23. So it was before all that happened in the wake of October 7. But what Chemerinsky actually said is that we have the right in Cal not to take any action against the Palestinian students for refusing or for banning Zionist speakers. They have the right. Those students have the right to ban Zionist speakers. He said Cal's not going to ban them, but the student groups do have that right. And he was very, very specific about that, why he said that. He was clear that, here we go. The school is on strong legal ground because student groups the Palestinians have the right to ban speakers based on viewpoints. Chemerinsky said, yes, we are not going to, and a lot of the Jewish groups weren't happy about this. The pro-Israel groups were not happy. They have the right to say, we're not going to force you to, we're not going to make you invite anyone who has views that you loathe. It would be like telling a Jewish group or, that they have to invite neo-Nazis. So, in fact, Chemerinsky did the opposite of what Brianna Joy Gray criticized him for allegedly doing. He did not take action against students who said they would not support Zionist speakers. He said they have the right not to support Zionist speakers. And he went further because what she's also saying is that students who, there would be sanctions taken against such students if they refused to invite or they were on some journal. That's the opposite of what he said. In fact, he criticized those at Harvard who did dox pro-Palestine students. He said, no, it's despicable. We shouldn't be calling them out. We shouldn't be trying to punish them. So Chemerinsky has in fact has fought for Zionist students. Now, there was, I'm going to just show from that video if I have it. Let me see if I can still get it up, because there was a tweet which really upset.
Must be the total elimination of Israel.
Stop that there. There was a tweet that really upset Chemerinsky, apparently, and that was with him holding the knife and fork. And they showed that in the Brianna Joy Gray video there with Robbie Suave. And I saw it and I thought, well, this is aggressive. And I can sort of see why this would bother Chemerinsky. But ultimately, I think it's within the realm. He is and this is what I thought at the time. I've come back to say, no, it's unfair, even in this format, but let me show you it a little bigger. I thought the knife and fork were a lot. I thought they were hurt. You know, I could certainly see why he would have been offended, but you know, he's a public person. He's a very powerful person. He's a privileged elite. So I'm like, you have to just take the good with the bad. I don't think this goes beyond the bounds. You're having a dinner. You've apparently held positions that are contrary to the rights of Palestinian students as I see them. Now it turns out he has supported the Palestinian students. But I still am okay with this, and especially because they've said we're not going to allow anyone to speak on Gaza. I think that was wrong. They should have allowed people to speak on Gaza. That's a really important issue. But again, I didn't think this, and I still don't think this is beyond the bounds. I'm okay with that. But what Brianna Joy Gray and Robbie didn't show, and I don't blame them for this, was the original tweet that the Palestinians had put up. And it's too far. This to me is anti-Semitic, okay? So showing Chemerinsky with the bloody knife and fork, and it's just that difference, right? I wouldn't, I think this goes too far. Do I know it's anti-Semitic? No, I don't. Are they saying Jew Chem has dinner while Gaza starves? No. But the bloody knife and fork go a little far, in my opinion. I understand the reason for it. Yes, Gaza is Israel's created, it's a bloodbath in Gaza due to Israel. But Chemerinsky he's supported the Gazans. Maybe not as far as you'd like, maybe not as aggressively as I would like, but he has. To me, that's too far. Now, the Palestinian students took that down very quickly. So that was up. It was obviously, spread, right? It was used against the Palestinians. But when it was called out to them, that was too far. They did, to their credit, take the blood off the knife and fork and replace them with non-knives and forks. Which again, to me, this is strong. It's aggressive. I don't love it. I wouldn't do it. I don't call that clearly anti-Semitic. I think the knife and fork with the blood go too far. I say that to again say why I understand a little bit better why Chemerinsky was on edge, why he was so upset, why he was shouting at the Palestinian student Afaneh. I still don't think he should have. I still wish he had behaved with a little bit more understanding as a member of a group that has been in the past targeted, that has been victimized, Jews. I wish he had embraced her, figuratively, not necessarily literally, because the touching by Professor Fiske was wrong. I wish he had handled it differently. I think it was clearly wrong what his wife did, but I am now more able to understand and empathize with him and why he was so upset. And I did want to share that for what it's worth. I will be back tomorrow, Wednesday. Always am happy on Wednesdays because we're halfway through the week, so I should be in a good mood. Everyone have a great afternoon or morning if you're still, if it's still morning where you are on the left coast perhaps. I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you'll join me. Always want to get those calls. Which have been few and far between of late, unfortunately. See you tomorrow.